Hello, and welcome to another episode of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I'm your host, Amanda, and my awesome co-host is...
Hello, I'm Megan.
Hey. So, homeschooling can feel like a lonely place when your values don't line up with the loudest voices in the room. That's one of the big reasons why we even created this podcast.
True story. Homeschool Moms Unfiltered is a space for homeschool parents and caregivers who want honest conversations instead of perfect conversations. We will totally share our wins with you, but we will also tell you about our failures and the times that we've had to pivot because things have gone off the rails. And the moments that remind us that even after all these years of homeschooling that we've each done, we still have days that just cannot end fast enough. They still happen.
Yes, they do. So beyond that, we are a super unique community in that we are proudly and loudly secular and progressive. We believe kids deserve an education built on evidence, curiosity, critical thinking, and compassion. We believe science is real. That means Jesus and the dinosaurs weren't Powells. Fossils are real. The earth is round. Abortion is healthcare. And yes, vaccines save lives, even the COVID one.
Yeah, I will agree with everything that you just said and take it up a notch to also add that Black lives absolutely fucking matter. If you call someone an illegal in a space that we are in or in a conversation with me that we're having, it'll be the last time we have a conversation together. That's the end. We are not on the same page here. Every kiddo and family is welcome in the Homeschool Moms Unfiltered universe. That means our communities, our meetings, our everything. No matter how you choose or how your kiddos present themselves to the world, how your family is made up, you're welcome here. Welcome 100% authentically as you are.
Yep, as you are. And every kiddo deserves to belong exactly as they are. Speaking of all kids, we also absolutely support public schools and teachers. We support fully funding public schools. Yes, even as homeschoolers. And we support paying educators well. Just because we are privileged enough to homeschool and have made that choice doesn't mean everyone can or should make that same choice. But every child still deserves a quality, free education, and we are happy to contribute tax dollars to the systems that are attempting, sometimes better than others, to accomplish that.
Yeah, I feel like my tax dollars are mostly going to bombs these days, and that makes me less happy. But you're right. I don't mind contributing tax dollars to education. I do to some other things. But yeah, but I mean, imagine just being like such a piece of shit human being that you're like, well, my kids are covered, so fuck everyone else's kids. I literally got into a conversation with somebody like that the other day. It was a very short-lived conversation because I literally just ended it with, the humanity is just oozing from you. And then I just stopped answering the person because I was like, what am I going to get out of this? I'm never going to convince this person that someone else's child deserves an education. So I can't. And I love that the same people that will stand there and tell you that other people's kids aren't their problems also profess to devote their life to following a brown socialist dude born in a barn over 2,000 years ago. I have to do a slow blink a couple of times, like in Legally Blonde, where she's like, I'm sorry, I think I just spaced out for a second or lost consciousness for a second. I forget what she says. But I need a moment to kind of reconcile how they think that those two things can possibly coexist. But that's a whole topic for another day because I digress. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it helps that their brown dude is somehow almost always depicted as a white guy.
Yeah.
I feel like that goes right along with the new sticker that we have in our merch shop, the homeschool with the confidence of a mediocre white guy. There's a lot of connections there that we don't really need to dive into right now, or we'll never get to the podcast.
No. There was a t-shirt that was popular on social media this past Christmas, and it was Mary and Joseph looking at the baby, and Joseph looks at Mary and goes, "Who the hell's white baby is this?" Right? I was like, this is the greatest shirt ever.
I did not see that. My mom would have loved that. That's hilarious. But yeah, all of that to say, if you've been looking for your homeschool people and you're realizing that it can be quite a struggle, welcome. Welcome home. Go ahead, take a minute to hit the follow button wherever you're listening and like us in all of the places. Honestly, with the way the algorithms are these days, doesn't guarantee that you'll find us super easily, but it does give you a better chance at it at least.
Yeah, stick around, because if you're looking for secular and progressive homeschooling, we're one of very few. Yeah, yeah, one of very few. All right. So today we're going to be talking about homeschooling neurodivergent kids who struggle. We recently received an interesting email about exploring this perspective, and it got our wheels turning. So we dug in and realized that some people who've been with us for a while and hear random utterances or full episodes about things our kids are up to or the way we're homeschooling, that people assume that our respective neurodivergent kids don't struggle because they see where we are now and they hear us talking about our homeschool days currently. And we're going to get into it today.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it isn't that our kiddos don't struggle. They absolutely struggle, even now, even still, all in different ways between the four kids we have between us. The reason our days are mostly smooth and they're excelling in the ways that they are is because we've spent years, like literally years and years, figuring out how they learn best and designing our homeschool around their needs. If you're earlier in your journey, it might be hard to do that because the reality is you're still learning. You're learning all things homeschooling. You're trying to get to know how your kids learn while also being the point person in charge of their entire education. And you're likely still working on developing the confidence to really break free from more traditional approaches and systems.
You said all that in such a dramatic way that it feels like you were implying that that's a lot. Do you feel like that's a lot?
No, no, just have a cup of coffee. It'll be fine.
You'll be good. Yeah. I mean, it could also be a situation too where your kiddo's diagnosis is relatively new and you're still trying to figure out which end is up and how to best support your kiddo with all this information that's recently been dumped on you in a psychiatry report that is the length of a short novel. And you're like, oh, some light reading. It could also be that you're on a bit of a journey to deconstruct some outdated thoughts around neurodivergence. We see that happen a lot. The initial response to an autism diagnosis is usually people slapping puzzle pieces on everything and saying things like, my kid was just diagnosed with autism. And listen, no shame. Number one, love that you came out and said something and that you are supporting your kid and you're getting behind your kiddo. That's amazing. But then over time, as people start to unpack some of the things around autism and culture and listening to autistic adults, you'll see this transition that beautifully occurs where the puzzle pieces are gone. The ableist puzzle piece disappears. And then language becomes more neurodivergent, affirming things like my kiddo is autistic instead of has autism. So there's a lot going on in those instances, all of which might lead you to still be somewhat expecting your amazing kiddo to fit into someone else's definition of learning rather than really truly breaking free and mitigating a lot of the struggle that comes along with neurodivergence in that sort of environment or mindset or philosophy or setting in the meantime. So we can, I think, make your lives easier today in a lot of ways. So stick with us.
Well, yeah. I mean, really, in a nutshell, it all comes down to no longer trying to shove a square peg into a round hole. So I
Mm-hmm.
think this is going to be a good conversation. But first, we begin all of our episodes with a weekly update. It is part of our anti influencer, keeping it real vibe around here. we will try to always share the good, the bad, the terribly messy, so that when you're having a bad day, you're not the only one. You're not alone. Don't get us wrong. We love homeschooling. We absolutely love that we get to do this. We love doing life with our kiddos. But some days are freaking hard, and you deserve an honest and complete picture. Before we dive in, I'm going to give a little blurb and say normally we record a little early. This time we recorded even more early because if you listened last week, you know that the time you're listening to this episode when it first drops, I'm out of the country and I refused to do any recording while I was traveling. So just know this is a little bit further out and we're talking about what's happening in our life and everything is still normal. And I didn't somehow go to Peru for 9 days and then come back for a podcast 7 days later. It was that math doesn't math. So we're
Yeah,
going to do
we
our best.
shift. We're flexible
Yeah.
humans. That's what we do. We go with the flow.
Yep.
Yeah, I like it.
So anyway, what do you got going on in your world, Megan?
Oh, let's see. So we're recording this a couple of days before my kiddo gets home from camp, which I had talked about last week. He's been very quiet at camp. So hopefully that means we're having fun. We're loving life. I think I definitely would have heard about it if we weren't loving life. So yeah, we shall see. He's off in a math and physics camp. But by the time this airs, he will be home and I will be back on daily chicken and rice duty. Amanda and I were doing kind of a debrief of open projects right now the other day and all that was outstanding, which is always a lot. And I was like, hello, I'm going to be unstoppable in this 2-week period because I don't have to make chicken and rice every single day, which if you're parenting an ARFID kiddo, like we're talking about neurodivergence today, and even if your kiddo doesn't have an official ARFID diagnosis, if you're parenting a neurodivergent kiddo, there's a decent chance you got some food shit going on. So even without the official diagnosis, you might also be making the same meal every single day for, I don't know, we're on year 7 or something. So, I mean, it's not terribly complicated. It's just the monotony of it. Or sometimes because he takes ADHD meds, he gets hungry at a specific time based upon what time he took his pill. And when he's hungry, he goes from not hungry to I'm going to eat my own arm off. And so whatever I'm in the middle of, you have to stop. And I love him to pieces. I will cook chicken and rice for him every single day for the rest of his life. I do not care. But it was nice to have a little break from the monotony of making chicken and rice every day. So, but I'll be back at it by the time you're listening to this episode. Plain basmati rice, plain piece of chicken, sauteed in a pan with a little bit of butter, no seasoning whatsoever. Yeah. So hopefully in our next episode, I will be able to update you a little bit more about his camping experience. Fitting with today's topic, this is my kiddo with the highest level of support needs out of my kids. So it's a little bit more nerve-wracking to send him off to camp for 2 weeks in another country. And right. So yeah, Astrid, by the time this airs, will be on her way back from a weaving conference that she went to in the United States where she was teaching, which is so exciting and so impressive for her. She's teaching 2 separate classes related to weaving topics. So that's fun. More fun than that, though, is she's bringing back for me craft singles and Hebrew National hot dogs, which I'm super excited about. I sent her with a little collapsible cooler tote bag so that she could put them in there. And I was like, put some ice, and then you have to dump the ice before TSA, obviously. And then when you get through TSA, go to a restaurant or whatever and get more ice and put it in there. But I was like, neither one of these things are real food. So even if they get a little warm on the plane, it'll be fine. So I'm pretty excited about that. She's excited because she's bringing a microscope that she ordered back with her. So she's pretty pumped about that. We talked about that in last week's episode, that she's got an upcoming project with that. So she's bringing that back with her, and my craft singles. Grilled cheese sandwich time is happening soon. I'm so excited. So yeah, what else? The city basically clears out here in the month of August. We are not going anywhere in August, but in Europe, August is like, well, we'll see you in September. It's like the month of August doesn't even exist. Everybody's in the beach or in the mountains. Even my housekeeper takes off for the entire month of August.
The thing is it exists just in this totally wonderful dimension that no one else gets to interfere in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, restaurants close. It's this whole different thing. So last year we were away a bunch in August. This year we are sticking close to home. The kids are all traveling and doing stuff. There's just too much happening. And I have a bunch of work stuff going on and whatever. But I did hire an August housekeeper this year because last year for the parts of August that we were here, I was like, I can't. I'm homeschooling. I'm working. I have all this stuff going on. I can't. So I did hire an August housekeeper for this year, but I bought our housekeeper a copy of my favorite book ever, which is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna in Portuguese for her month off, and Astrid crocheted her a bookmark and we sent her off on her vacation with some pleasure reading. And, I'm like, we'll see you in September. We'll miss you. So yeah, that's that. And then we've just been working on unit studies like crazy. We put out a unit study every single month, which is standard, par for the course for me and Amanda. That's what we do. They're secular, they're progressive. You don't have to worry about us putting a bunch of whitewashed crap in them and you having to vet everything. We've done all that work for you. But we started in June with an America 250 unit study, which was a response to the fact that every homeschool group was filled with these hellacious 250 years of freedom units. And I'm like, how much more tone deaf and racist can you be? I was just like, oh, I can't look at this anymore. Amanda was in Hawaii the month before for her honeymoon. And I was like, let me just sketch this out.
For my anniversary, for anyone who's listening.
Sorry. Yeah, that thing. Yeah. Close enough. Whatever. All these things. Yeah. Lovebirds. Yeah. So Amanda was in Hawaii and I was like, let me just outline it for Amanda and I can show it to her when she gets back. And then I was working on the outline and some of the things I was having trouble explaining what was in my head in words. And then I ended up accidentally building basically the entire unit study in a really messy brain dump sort of way. And I was like, I'm really sorry, but I hope you like this idea now that you're back. If you don't, it's okay. Like, I mean, I had fun writing it all down. Self-satisfying for me to create something that was the opposite of all this garbage that was out there. But then Amanda was like, not only do I love it, but I'm going to up it and say, let's do a whole American history series. And so in July, we did US presidents. And then for August, we've done a unit on policy and major laws and court cases and stuff that is just, I was building a section the other day and chatting with Amanda because we pass it back and forth all along. And I was like, I think this might be the best unit study we've ever built. I love it. It is a work of art, if I do say so myself. It is beautiful. And then starting to work now on the September one, which will be about 9/11, and then the resulting Patriot Act, and there'll be 2 novel studies in there, and it's going to be another big one. So it'll be 4, which eventually we will cram into one PDF file as well that you can download as a big American history unit as well, but you can also buy them individually. But yeah, it's been busy, but I like building unit studies. So for me, it was fun. And Amanda builds the unit studies. So for her, it's been busy, but less fun, more busy, but I quite like unit studies. So I was a happy camper, but yeah. So what's new with you, Amanda, besides proofreading endless unit studies? Like, here's a 65-page PDF, Amanda.
Yeah, no problem. I'll check all those links, proof and edit all of those pages. It'd be great. No, really, I don't have much to report. I have been busy trying to wrap up work stuff, right? Stuff for Homeschool Moms Unfiltered and a little bit of contract work that I do on the side. Plus, if you've been listening for a while, you know that last year I stepped down from the HOA. It might even been a year and a half ago at this point, but I am still on the social committee, and our summer social is coming up at the end of August. So there's a fair bit of planning and coordination that goes into that. So trying to get that all sorted out and taken care of. I will say my kiddo recently got braces, well, Invisalign technically. So that's been a pretty big adjustment. First he refused to eat because he couldn't handle the feel of the little dots that they put on your teeth, especially when food entered the mix, because textures and feel and all of that stuff can be a big issue. And there were lots of tears getting over them. And then, of course, once you get past that part, there's the fact that every week with Invisalign, you have to put in a new tray that shifts your teeth. So every week you have a day or two that's more uncomfortable than the others. And yeah, I mean, it's summer. If you're watching the video, you might see that for the first time ever, I think I'm wearing a tank top. That does not happen very often, but it's officially warm, and I wouldn't normally be making soup to heat up my home in the middle of the day. But, there are things that we do because we love our kiddos, and I might not have to make chicken and rice every day, but I do still occasionally have to come up with other plans. I thought we would be good with things like pudding and mashed potatoes, but no, it has to be something that can be sucked through a straw so it doesn't get anywhere close to the teeth bumps. So there's that. And on a totally random personal note, I was recently finally diagnosed with some specific kind of rosacea. My dermatologist wants me taking 6 weeks of antibiotics to get it under control, but my primary doesn't want me to do that because she predicts that I will basically need to take the antibiotics every year, and she doesn't support that, which, I mean, generally that doesn't sound like a great idea to me either.
I thought you were going to say she predicted a yeast infection that was worthy of the Guinness Book of World Records after 6 weeks of antibiotics.
For all of the health problems that I have, I feel like I really need to find some wood and knock on it. I have done courses of antibiotics for up to 3 months before and never had a yeast infection. That is not something that I generally struggle with. I'm really good about making sure I take probiotics in all sorts of different forms, both tablets and fermented foods and things like that. And so it's not been a huge problem, but my primary worry is like loads about bacteria resistant
Yeah.
or antibiotic resistant bacterial infections and viruses and things like that. And so she's not pro that, which, okay, fine, I get. So we talked about it and I decided to get one of those LED face masks. I'm not positive that I'm sold on it, but with my skin issues and how sensitive my skin has become with age and everything else I have going on, I can hardly use any serums or creams or lotions. And so some research says that those masks can help clear your skin of rosacea and things like that. And then also there can be like the anti-aging benefits. So since I can't use any sort of anti-aging serums or creams or things like that, maybe it'll work. I have no idea. I have no idea if it'll work, but I know that my skin is like extra pissed off that I'm messing with it. So real talk, if you use one of these and like it actually worked, especially for like skin clearing, but also if it helped with aging stuff and revitalize your skin, drop a message like on socials or send us a private comment or comment wherever you're listening. I would love the encouragement to keep going because it says it takes 8 weeks for the initial thing to work. And I'm only like a week and a half in, and I would like to maybe scratch my face off. So if you're like, yeah, stick with it, I would love to hear that. Or if you're like, actually, it did nothing for me, I probably don't want to hear that as much because they're really fucking expensive and I already bought it. But I kept all of the boxes so I could resell it if I'm like, yeah, that was total waste.
Maybe somebody else can cure their rosacea with this on Facebook Marketplace.
Right. I mean, we laugh, but that's totally where it'll go if I'm like, yeah, never mind, screw this. So, all right, let's talk about neurodivergent kiddos and their various struggles. Look, we as homeschoolers are in a very unique position. We are able to accommodate like nobody's business. So, real talk, we promise that we try to give you a balanced view into our homeschool lives. And we do that. I mean, Megan still cracks up thinking about the time that I shared that I lost my ever loving shit with the kiddo about not picking up water bottles that he kept leaving on the stairs. And the scene totally ended with me kicking a bunch of empty water bottles down the stairs. We make intentional choices to be open on the podcast. And me, more than Megan, I get my fair share of crap from people who are like, I cannot believe you did that. I cannot believe you lost it. What you need. I'm like, I'm real. And sometimes I lose my shit. I don't know anyone who doesn't occasionally lose their shit and just like, oh my God, I am not the version of myself that I wanted to be. But the straw is here. The back is broken. So we try very hard to share that. But also we, as in Megan and I, we each treat our kiddos as humans. They're not adults yet. Megan's got one that might be considered, but they're our kids. They're not subservient little monsters who should be seen and not heard. We also don't exploit them for money. You'll notice that they very rarely make an appearance in any of our socials or on our feeds or anything like that. We are very careful and protective of our kids, unlike what many people in the parenting and homeschooling sphere realm of life are these days.
Hello. The one, you know who I'm talking about, that drives me the most crazy. Oh, I can't stand, like, I can't not follow, but also can't stand. And I am convinced that this person still moved their family out of California because the law was changed in California and it was like, oh, I legally have to pay for exploiting my kids and putting them out in all my videos, and I can't make money off of them anymore and not pay them. Like, peace out, California. So
Yeah.
yeah, we don't do that thing.
Yeah. For anyone who doesn't know, yeah, there was a recent law, fairly recent, that passed that if your kids even appear in something that makes money, and actually, even if it doesn't make money, but you used them, it's not their fault that your campaign didn't go anywhere. You have to compensate them at appropriate market value for being part of your influencer or content creator life.
Hmm.
And there are some people who definitely aren't okay with that. But anyway, so we have given our kids the option to draw a line and determine what is available for public consumption and what is not. For example, my kiddo has a podcast pseudonym. My kiddo allows me to share some of his neurodivergence, but not all. And that is his right. That's his right.
Hmm.
Fundamentally, as a human, he has the right to decide how much gets shared for public consumption. Just because I decided to do this very public thing doesn't mean my entire family is automatically out there in public life for public fodder as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, how are we going to teach our kids about boundaries and consent if we don't honor theirs? It's not possible. On my side of things, my kids are okay with me sharing their names. So when I share their names, those are the ones that I wrote down on the paper in the hospital when they came shooting out of my body. But they're also a bit older, and two of the three of them kind of have some online presence to an extent. One of my kids teaches Pokemon classes online, and so he'll share some stuff every once in a while on social media. And then my daughter is published and has a massive Instagram account. And like, there, I mean, when I go to events with her, we don't make it out of the parking lot without people being like, "Can I take a picture with you?" Like, people know who she is. So not using her name on the podcast really wouldn't do much of a thing with preserving her privacy. That's not a thing. So yeah, and they're pretty open about their neurodivergence diagnoses. So that's fine. I do have one boundary in place with more of a medical diagnosis that feeds over into mental health and then has some crossover with neurodivergence as well. So yeah, I don't talk about that one. But yeah, we'll absolutely be honoring those boundaries today while still sharing as much as we can as it relates to this topic. And we've got plenty of meat for you today. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's kick off with some just super basic myth busting. People often see or hear about Megan's teens and my tween and our current state of affairs, we'll call it, and they assume it has just always been easy. It wasn't. And honestly, some days and even seasons, it still isn't. Our kids have experienced anxiety, executive dysfunction, sensory challenges, emotional regulation issues, burnout, dysgraphia, attention struggles, memory gaps, issues with recall and working memory, and so many other things that really come into play day in and day out in their everyday life, and especially when it comes to learning.
Yeah, I was sitting here as you were reading off that list. I'm like, check, check, check. We've done all of these things. Yeah. Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, I had a situation a couple of years back where with my youngest where I didn't even know what to do anymore. And I was just so afraid and so stressed and so exhausted. And I was running a book club at the time. And I said to the group, "Do you mind if we read The Explosive Child? I've heard it might be helpful for what's going on in my life." And I knew people in the book club had similar challenges, situations, experiences. So it wasn't completely selfish. And
Mhm.
it's a good book. I respect the book. If you're looking for something, it's a good book. I was super disheartened reading the book though, because I was already doing all of the things that the author suggested and was still about to break from stress and anxiety over this kiddo. And I was like, oh my gosh, this book is supposed to be the thing that offers these solutions that changes people's lives. And I've done these things. I've been doing them for years and nothing's happening. So my next step was to put out a plea to a large homeschool group that I was very active in at the time. And I said, I'm going to be at this Zoom link on Monday at 7 p.m. I need help. And it was wonderful. So many people came and shared their experiences and offered reassurance and support and comfort. It's been years. And to this day, I still remember I sat there bawling my eyes out in this meeting, being like, I don't know what to do. And it was the meeting that ended up helping me make the decision. And then the second phase of that was waiting for my kiddo to also make the same decision to start his ADHD meds. And that has been life changing, absolutely life changing. But I was at my wit's end before that. I was just perpetually tired and stressed. I'm still somehow perpetually tired and stressed, but it's different. It's very, very different. It's not the same intensity and the source is different, which is different. I feel like anytime something's out of alignment with your kid or kids, I feel like more severe than anything else. I can handle most everything else better than my kids being out of sorts.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that totally makes sense. I mean, the topic of meds and whether or not to start them comes up regularly in our home, right? Something will happen and I'll realize it's time to check in with my kiddo and see if he's feeling like, yeah, maybe it's time to go talk to the doctor about that again. We can have those check ins because we've been really honest and open about pretty much everything that impacts him. Sure, there's a chance that at some point I'll have to pull the mom card and say, I'm sorry. I understand that you feel you still have things under control, but I think it's time we bring a medical professional back into the conversation
Hmm.
because my job is to respect him, but it's also to protect him. And he is still a kid. And that can be a really complicated tightrope to walk. You know, respecting their boundaries, respecting what they want, but also knowing that at some point you have to make some hard calls and make the decisions that are right. And look, this is not a competition. We had Leah on our show about a year and a half ago or so, and she's a total care autism parent for her daughter who is profoundly autistic. I know Megan well enough to know that she's not sitting here going, I have the toughest time out of everyone. Both of us have kids who are independent and will eventually leave the nest. And that shapes our current realities and how we parent and how we homeschool. We aren't going to say that our day to day looks like Leah's or yours. Everyone's experiences are different and valid. But the key to keep in mind is that no matter where you and your kiddo are in your struggle, on your struggle bus, you have the freedom to do what works for you and your kids. You don't have to jump through bureaucratic hoops and tear down red tape to do what works for your kid or your kiddos.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, all kids struggle, even neurotypical kids. Some kids will struggle far more than others. Many will struggle in some areas and excel in others. Our goal in this isn't to remove all of the struggles. We've done episodes on this before, knowing when to push and when to back off, how to raise kids who have grit to forge through difficult obstacles and how to balance those things. But today we're specifically going to be talking about if there's obstacles that are blocking learning, what we can and should do in our homeschool lives in order to be removing those things unapologetically. I always think of mother-in-laws when I say that. I'm like, I don't really care what your mother-in-law thinks. Unapologetically, you get to do what's right for your kid.
Yeah. Now, as we get into this, it is worth repeating. and repeating and repeating. And yes, we are absolutely aware that we sound like a broken record, but we keep talking about it because it is a factor in so many homeschool and education related conversations that we are involved in or that we see happening around us in spaces that we participate in. We need to start off by talking about deschooling. We often talk about how essential it is to deschool before you start homeschooling. And no, summer vacation, summer break doesn't count. And it's in our book, and we did a whole episode about deschooling. But the reality is, after your initial kind of chunk of deschooling time, you're probably going to find moments here and there where you catch yourself and you're like, I think I need to unpack that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when we talk about that, I think it is like anything else where you're trying to deprogram stuff that is deeply embedded, these kind of societal thoughts and expectations. I kind of relate it to growing up in the 90s during, or being a teen in the 90s more specifically, during the nothing tastes as good as skinny feels era where the cocaine waif look was in. And I have worked for years, and I know plenty of other women have as well. I don't have these conversations with people of other genders as often, but I know my female friends in particular, this has been a big thing for us our whole lives, having to do this work to try and accept our bodies and acknowledge the power of my body beyond its aesthetics. I built and birthed 3 humans. And if you haven't built and birthed humans, that doesn't make my body more valid than yours. Maybe you hiked a mountain. I'd be dead at the foot of the mountain. I'd be like, take a picture at the top and text it to me, right? Like, so whatever it is that makes your body amazing and strong, that's that thing. But every once in a while, thoughts still kind of creep into my head, and you have to catch the thought and go, oh shit, where'd that come from? I thought I had unpacked a lot of this stuff, but there's more to unpack, right? And so thoughts about education are the same. If you did your initial deschooling chunk, you're still going to have thoughts that come through, and you're going to be like, oh shit, there's more to unpack. Okay, great.
Well, yeah, no, I feel that. I mean, of the medical records and the therapy sessions to go along with the eating disorder diagnosis. So, yeah, it's a great analogy because we still see questions every day where people are asking for permission to change X or Y about their kiddo's education, or they'll say, no, we're doing X, Y, and Z, and every day is a struggle, and there are tears, or kiddo doesn't retain anything, or one of my least favorites, they're fighting me every step of the way. Okay, then something is not working, and you don't need permission to change what isn't working. Very, very little is written in stone when it comes to homeschooling. You are the teacher, the principal, the curriculum designer, and herder of these cats. That's why you're probably exhausted. I mean, you're wearing a lot of hats. Honestly, you're going to be tired. But that also means that you get to make those changes and those decisions if something is blocking learning for your kiddo.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Amanda knows I love to sit down and write things down and do a good brain dump on a piece of paper. Amanda's like, I don't need a piece of paper. I can brain dump while I'm washing dishes. But I would totally sit down with a blank piece of paper and brain dump things like, what isn't working right now? What are the problems right now in the last week, in the last month, right? What is causing friction in my kiddo's education? What's stressful? What am I dreading doing? The days that we're doing this, great. The day that I know I have to bust out this, I'm like, oh, for crying out loud, today's going to be that day and it's going to be awful. Write that down because that's a source of friction. Or my kid only enjoys X, or my kid cries every time we do Y. Anytime we do X, we have the best day ever. Every time I bring out Y, whether that's a material, a manipulative, a curriculum, a book, whatever, we end up stressed and going absolutely nowhere.
It is so true. To this day, if you bring up the book Charlotte's Web, my kiddo is like, oh God, Charlotte's Web. Not because it makes you cry or anything else, but because we were trying a new curriculum, trying to get through the novel study we had for Charlotte's Web was one of the worst homeschooling experiences we ever had. So
Oh
we did
my.
exactly one novel study that way. And I was like, clearly not the resource for us. Probably should have stopped before the end of it, but I really wanted to make sure we got through Charlotte's Web. But yeah, if
Yeah.
it's not working, it's not working.
Right. So figure out what wasn't working, whether you can already identify that, or maybe you have to ask your kiddo and have some conversations around that. And then write those things down as things that you know not working. And we have much more expanded variations of these types of activities in our book to help you do this beyond a blank sheet of paper. We have templates that you can fill out and brainstorming activities with much more direction and all that kind of stuff. So if you're looking for that, it is available. It does exist. But you get to decide what your homeschool journey looks like, not what the school system is doing, not what you think you should be doing, not what you think is a mandatory element for a successful future, not what you're doing because if you don't, your mother-in-law will judge you. None of that matters. And I'll email your mother-in-law and tell her to go fuck herself if you need me to. I've done it to my own mother-in-law, so it's fine. I'll do it for yours too if you need me to. It's your kid. She raised her kid. You get to raise your kid.
I mean, let's be honest. Of course, some of that matters, but it really shouldn't matter. And it definitely shouldn't matter as much as you're probably letting it matter. But I'll be honest, when that kind of judgment or you're thinking about this, like it can get to you a little. But the point is, it shouldn't matter. You can start with a blank slate. Time travel back to when you were a kid. Imagine if someone had asked you to build your dream theme park or what you do with $1 million. I mean, if you give that task to a kid, they're probably going to throw out some wild but equally awesome thing like my theme park would have a lazy river but made of chocolate sauce, right? Or if I had $1 million, I'd buy a big farm and have horses and also a house where my grandparents could live so I could see them every day. Because kids don't let reality or societal expectations get in the way of these sorts of activities and brainstorming. So channel your inner kid and build an educational plan that works for your child. It doesn't have to sound logical or make sense to anyone else as long as it's going to work for your kiddo and you enough that you can implement it.
Mm-hmm. You don't have to make your kid fit into anything that society offers. The resources you use, the schedule you build, the goals you should set can revolve entirely around what works for your kid.
Absolutely. If you've listened to our podcast for any length of time, you'll have heard episodes about audiobooks and graphic novels being worthy and valuable in your child's education. We have talked about desk setup, sitting on a bouncy ball. Megan's kid used to have a bicycle desk. Walking pads are an option. Some people school on trampolines. We've talked about interest-led learning and project-based learning, tips for homeschooling with ADHD. All of those episodes combined are the reason you hear us talking more about the things our kids are rocking and less about the struggling.
Yeah. And again, they still struggle. We still make sure that they're developing resilience and preparing for the real world where sometimes life sucks and you have to muddle through something that completely sucks and is hard. But those instances are intentional and strategic. We're choosing where and how much to let them struggle. We're starting small when we're giving them something to help them stretch and grow through struggle. And we're slowly increasing their abilities and their tolerances. I mean, at the end of the spring semester, my kiddo had to write a research paper. Kiddo hates writing. I mean, hates writing. He got to choose the subject and had a tutor function as a body double for the entire process. But I can assure you that that process was still uncomfortable for him and required him to stretch outside his happy zone and his comfort zone. I don't even have to use my imagination and imagine it. I heard about it a lot. So yeah, I heard it's almost time for class today and I'm writing this paper and it's never ending. But he did it in a way that was supported and it wasn't a quantum leap outside of his comfort zone. It was just enough outside to stretch that muscle. If he had been tasked with writing a paper on a random topic and not something related to physics and nuclear energy, which is what he chose, it would have been way worse. And honestly, I doubt that it would have even gotten done if he didn't have a body double there to do it. It just, no paper. Okay.
Well, yeah. And while Megan's kiddo has a tutor who functions in that role, you can absolutely body double your kiddo. We didn't create the term body doubling. Whoever did must have taken classes from some of those homeschool industry thought leaders where they like to make things sound much more complicated than they actually are. But body doubling is really just the idea that it's easier to do something when someone else is in the room with you.
Mhm.
Maybe you're folding laundry while your kid does math, or they're cleaning their room while you're answering emails. You're typically not actively helping them. Sometimes just having another human nearby is enough to help keep your brain engaged. I mean, come on. Even before I knew what body doubling was, I knew that I did better at tackling a huge cleaning project or packing for a move if I had someone there to keep me company or at least to talk on the phone with me. We all have specific tasks that we can't or maybe shouldn't outsource, but we can still find them tedious. Providing an accommodation like body doubling doesn't make your kiddos' learning less rigorous or less important. Megan's kids still wrote an accurate and in depth paper about nuclear waste. One so well researched that he tripped their internet monitoring software regularly for about 2 weeks. So the learning process was solid. It was rigorous. In fact, it's probably more rigorous because they can finally engage. Their brain finally allows them to really do what it's wanting to do, and they just couldn't find the way forward.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and aside from the fact that he likely ended up on some or multiple government watch lists as a result of all those internet searches, truly, what do I care what he's writing about? They're just little versions of us. They're little tiny humans. Well, in this case, he's taller than me, but you get what I'm saying. They're going to have things that they naturally lean into and things that they find a grind, just like we do. So think about your preferred genre of reading. I'm a historical fiction lover, and Amanda loves fairy and werewolf smut. If someone made us switch for 2 months and because they felt like we'd each be more well-rounded readers if we switched and explored genres outside of our own, both of us would be tortured. I would hate reading smut, and Amanda would fall asleep one chapter
Yeah.
into a World War II novel. She'd be like, oh my gosh, why does she read this for fun? We recently did an episode about interest-led learning. So if you're not sold on that fact, it wasn't just our vibes and our like, this is what we think. We based it on research that came out of Cambridge. Check that out because there's ways that you can lean into their interests to make learning more accessible and less of an uphill climb. But you also need to, again, walk that tightrope that Amanda was referencing earlier of doing that without smothering their special interest and making it so awful that it's no longer interesting. So good luck with that. That's one of those like you're damned if you do and damned if you don't kind of things. Trying to find that balance is fun, but we can help. We've got you.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Interests naturally create motivation and attention. Using interests helps with memory and leads to deeper understanding. And it often builds confidence that can bleed over into trying new things, just a little bit outside of their comfort zone. We've actually been talking about that idea in our parent book club that we have over on Patreon. We're currently reading The Yes Brain. It's Again, it's part of our Homeschool Moms Unfiltered book club. If you're interested, it's over on Patreon. You can come join us if you'd like. We meet every other week on Zoom on Mondays. And if you don't read the book, we totally won't judge you for it. But anyway, the book that we're reading right now talks about these zones your kiddo operates from within. The Sparks Note version basically is green is where we want our kids most of the time. It talks about how it's our job as parents to help them broaden their green zone of emotional regulation and also help them find their way back to the green zone more often and more quickly over time. In the context of the book, they're referring mostly to social emotional skills and experiences, but the same can absolutely be true for academic scenarios as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. It's kind of a bit like the old chicken or the egg conversation. If we try to engage a kiddo in academics in a way that doesn't jive with how they learn best, it will be hard to get them on board or for them to build confidence. But if we take the time to work solely in ways that are comfortable for them, the confidence comes, and then you can focus on stretching slowly but surely to other areas and branching out in those ways.
Well, absolutely, because a lot of times the tears and frustration and struggles have very little to do with the actual academics. It's usually about social emotional regulation and executive functioning skills. And those often look very different for neurodiverse folks, adults and kids alike. And yeah, sometimes that slowly stretching past your comfort zone comes very slowly. Your kid is nearly 15 and he wrote a great paper. Could other kids have done that at 12 or 13? Yeah, probably, maybe. Was Liam ready for that at 12 or 13?
Oh, hell no. Hell no. No. And he did. He did a great job on the paper, but there are still aspects of it that aren't what other 14-year-olds or nearly 15-year-olds would be doing. Did it have a tremendous lack of appropriate punctuation? Yeah. Yeah, it did. I shared the Google Doc link in the group chat that I share with my mom and my husband. And my husband read it. And now in typical engineer fashion, my husband read it from a content perspective where he was sucked in on the nuclear waste. I was like, there's not a comma in this whole paper, but my husband was all in on the nuclear waste part. So he wasn't paying attention to that so much. And so he was super impressed with the level of writing around the science and all of that. And he goes, did he chat GPT this? Now listen, I am married to a workaholic. I've talked about this before. He has always been completely sucked into work and completely disconnected from our kids, has no clue what's going on. I've talked about the fact that he got their birthdays wrong on a form at one point. He was 0 for 3 on birthdays. Okay. So he's pretty clueless about what goes on with our kids. But I was like, that is the dumbest question on a few points. Number one, this kid has cried himself to sleep more times than I can even count to you because he's devastated about ice melt and the doom that that means for polar bears and penguins. Number two, this is a kid who has begged us to stop banking at Chase Bank because of their ties to fossil fuel funding. So I'm like, if you think that this is a kid who's using Chat GPT because he's like, screw the environment, absolutely not. But then I said to him also, I go, if Chat GPT had written this, it would have had commas. There would have been commas in it. I am very well aware that the kid wrote it because it was funny.
And you love your commas. When we edit, I would say half of what I do is like taking away the second space after a period and removing commas. Like, this does not need a comma. It's 2 words or less as an introductory part. It does not need a comma.
Yeah. I'm keeping those 2 spaces till I die. I was a typewriter kid. I'm younger. I'm like slightly younger than you. How are you not a 2 spaces typewriter kid? I'm keeping them until I die. So I said to my husband, I was like, no, he's not cheating. He wrote that. There's no commas in it. Apparently he got my husband's lack of comma use and not my over comma use.
Yeah, exactly. So a future stretch goal will include commas. Just like my kiddo has a future stretch goal of learning to infer interpersonal cause and effect in his own writing, which came up when he did his spring research paper on Stalin and his formative years. He was all about what happened and his parents and how he grew up and how that probably led to these things. And his oversight teacher was like, how do you think that made him feel? And my kid just looked at her like, how could I possibly know? I'm not anything like Stalin, and I haven't had any of these lived experiences. How could I possibly know?
That's fantastic.
And very appropriate for this particular episode. Yeah. I mean, like, so stretch goals, they're always there, but they're both growing and they're stretching and they're doing it in a low resistance way because there's enough of their special interests woven in there to keep them interested. I mean, I don't know what your algorithm looks like, but I do know how often the Homeschool Moms Unfiltered algorithm shows reels and stories about ADHDers or autistics and their special interest topics. Some kids spend years going deeper and deeper into a specific area. We don't necessarily have to fight against that. We just have to find ways to use it to help them grow.
Mhm. I watched a video the other day. I almost put it on our stories on the Homeschool Moms Unfiltered account, but I think I was just busy and I was scrolling and I didn't do it. But it was this guy from England who had traveled to the US to see the largest steam engine or something, and it went by. And he had all these different cameras. He had the forehead, all this stuff. And it was this massive steam engine. Her name was like Big Bertha or something, I forget. And she came down and it was really slow. And this guy, the pure joy in this human being overseeing this train. And I went to his profile. I think I might have followed him. And he's an engineer. He's young, but he's probably in his 20s. He's an engineer and works in things related to trains. But this has been his special interest forever. And I'm like, I can guarantee you this human being is neurodivergent as hell, but his joy, it went viral. And the comments, like one person was like, the number of times that I have watched this to just absorb his happiness is, I can't even count. It's a beautiful thing. So special interests, deep special interests are okay. And I think sometimes there's fear among parents that their neurodivergent kiddos tunnel vision for one thing. They may never move on to something else. For us as intentional unschoolers, this isn't something that I worry about, which is good because I have one of those kids, right? Who has been sucked into the same special interests for 10 years from the age of 7 to 17. I mean, how many people have a kid whose special interest at 7 is still, they're saying like they're super into dinosaurs or trains or, but they grow out of it or whatever. And it's like, oh no, I was going to say we're still in it as deep as we were. No, we're like way deeper than we were. She has been sucked into this. And truly about 95% of her education has come through fiber arts, right? She and I co-wrote a book on how that is possible and how that could even happen. How she managed to learn history and science and geography and complex math and chemistry and so much more through the filthy hair that gets shaved off a sheep or an alpaca every year in spring. You're like, that is not possible. I promise you, it is possible. It is 100% possible. So in this scenario, if you have a kid that has this strong pull towards one area, whether it's that or that sweet kid, I call him a kid, he was in his 20s, but that sweet kid who loved trains, what do you think the odds are that you're going to be able to use a sticker chart or just good old fashioned cajoling this kid into becoming a CPA or a pharmacist because that's a more traditional route? It's not going to happen, nor in those cases should it. I mean, train kids' joy was what people were attracted to on the internet, to live through this person's unfiltered joy for something that they're so passionate about after all these years. So when your kid has a strong pull towards something and they're super sucked into it, from an unschooling perspective, I'm like, let them do their thing. I promise you, it will lead to learning opportunities that you couldn't even fathom. And I am absolutely speaking from experience. Like the stuff that this kid has ventured into that you would think has nothing to do with fiber arts, but it does. It's just a very big spider web extension at this point because we're 10 years in. So she's gotten her way pretty far out there. And I know, take it for what it's worth because I'm the hippy dippy one between us, between Amanda and I, right? But like, I often think about what would happen when Jim Henson made the first Kermit out of his mom's coat. He used an old pair of jeans and his mom's green coat that she didn't really wear anymore. And he was 18 years old when he created the first Kermit. And suddenly he's walking around with this frog on his hand and talking to it, and it's talking back. And I'm wondering, did he have hippy dippy parents who were like, look at his joy, it's so wonderful? Or were his parents more traditional and they were sitting there having these hushed, worried conversations like, I just don't know where we went wrong with him. Should we have been stricter? Does he need a therapist? Of course, back then you didn't even probably consider a therapist, but they're thinking like, we have done something tragically wrong with this child, but look at where his special interests led him. And so I'm all for a special interest taking over a kid's life. It's okay. I think for a lot of neurodivergent people, it works really well. It works really, really well for plenty of neurodivergent people who you see who are just so singularly focused on specific things, and they carry that through for years and years and years, and it doesn't wear off. So it's okay if you have that kid. And if you don't have that kid, that's okay too. But if you do, it's okay.
Yeah, I'm going to say that right there is one of those things that definitely exemplifies how different we approach life and learning. I can't help think that unless you have loads of privilege going into this, and by that I mean lots of financial stability and no serious need for your child to be able to provide for themselves, maybe don't hang your hat on them being the 0.001% of the population that goes totally off of the rails and still becomes wildly successful. And even then, they might become a Zuckerberg instead of a Henson. I'm just saying. I don't,
That is
but
true.
that said, this is a perfect example of the fact that even for two perimenopausal white women, we come from pretty different places and we homeschool in very different ways. If you're new here, this is just the beginning of those differences. So, like I briefly mentioned before, another thing we should be keeping in mind when we are evaluating how and why our kid is struggling, what is their current executive function skill set? And what executive function skills are required to do the things we're trying to get them to do? If they're struggling, is this an executive function gap? If so, again, the beauty is that you don't need permission from anyone to work on closing that skill gap. You have the perfect opportunity to incorporate that into your homeschooling. These are life skills that we want to give our kids to prepare them for whatever they do next.
Beyond that, we've talked about memory a couple of times this episode, and I would love to circle back to that because all three of my kids have memory. Are there opportunities for me to work with my kids and improve their memory? Yeah, sure. There's probably opportunities to work on their memory, but the gains are so small and so slow that all the things that we could be working on and focusing on, like, is there enough bang for our buck in doing this? So in the meantime, I know my kiddos have memory gaps, both short term, long term. It's very, very common with certain neurodivergence, right? Like I could let that kiddo struggle and lose confidence or build up a dislike of school or learning in general or whatever the specific task or activity is where their memory deficits really make them feel like crap. Or I can give them memory tools and I can provide stuff to bridge that gap.
I mean, don't even get me started on this. All of those stupid improve your working memory in 60 seconds a day apps, like such bullshit. Just like most of the ads for supplements that actually look like real testimonials that are actually just MLM links and whatever other. There is nothing wrong with practicing and revisiting things. But if your kiddo is struggling with letters, print out a letter formation chart and laminate that puppy, put it in one of those sleeves that makes it reusable, and they can always have it nearby. If they're struggling with memorizing math facts, that's okay. Print out a chart on cardstock and keep it handy in a folder with all of their other memory tools instead of trying to force things that, number one, aren't working, and number two, just cause stress and frustration. Find the accommodations, find the workarounds that help your child succeed and feel accomplished. Teach them that using the tools at their disposal is far more important than guessing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why it's so hard.
I've talked before about the fact that I made Liam a recipe book for his favorite, like the kid doesn't eat, so like 4 recipes. And so he would make banana bread. And let's say he was supposed to put in 3 scoops of sugar using his scooper. I made him recipe cards in Canva and I put check marks next to the things. I literally had 3 check marks because he would forget in the process of scooping the 3 scoops of sugar. He'd do one and he'd pour it in and he'd be like, is that the first one or the second one or the third? He'd have no clue what number scoop that just was. So I put 3 little boxes and it would go in a sleeve that he could use a dry erase marker on. And so he would do 1 scoop put his scoop down, pick up his dry erase marker, make a check mark. Do another scoop, put his scoop down. Otherwise, he'd be like, I've lost track and I don't know how many scoops of sugar I put in. That's how bad his memory is. But I'm like, okay, that's okay. There's a workaround for that. It's not hard for me to make you a tool where you can keep track of how many scoops you're putting in there. And does it take him like 9 years to make a batch of banana muffins? Yeah, but he's got time. He's fine. And he still did it. And he feels accomplished when he's done. So it's fine. I mean, I'm a grown ass adult and I have a password keeper in my phone where my kids' social security numbers are. They're protected. Their global entry numbers, their passport numbers and expiration dates. And then not in my passport keeper, but just in my notes app, I have a thing with my kids' phone numbers. I don't know my own kids' phone numbers at all. I have to ask them or look them up in my phone. I don't hold myself accountable to trying to remember all of the 9,000 numbers you have to keep track of for human beings in this world with all the different numbers that they're given. I put systems into place to make sure that they're accessible when I need them, and that's fine. It doesn't make me a lesser human because I haven't memorized all of these things. It reduces stress and friction in my life, and I still get to the same place in the end. I just needed a tool to get there. Our kids can do the same thing.
Well, exactly. Reduced stress and friction opens up more brain space and energy reserves for other things. I'm not sure why adults are so quick to gatekeep these types of systems and solutions. It isn't cheating. It's recognizing when your energy, in this case, mental energy, can be used more efficiently and effectively. The goal is to grow their independence and skills in general over time. But if we try to just white knuckle our way through because they quote unquote should have these skills by some arbitrary date or timeline, we are setting everyone up for a stressful and unpleasant experience.
Yeah, totally agree. I was laughing at the concept of adults gatekeeping these things. Who do we think we are that we're so you have to earn this?
But not you.
Yeah, I can't remember any of the important numbers that I need all the time, but you have to remember all of them. It makes no sense. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and like you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, another thing that we can do is involve them in decisions, even early on, and even on big things, small things, all the decisions. Oftentimes, our kids will have a very visceral reaction to something long before they have the words to express the why behind that feeling. I've talked before about this program that my kids took part in when they were in preschool. And it was a personal safety course in very subtle ways. They were giving the kids age appropriate skills to know how to deal with people touching them inappropriately, fire safety, gun safety, things like that. But really, the core message of the program was if something is making your tummy turn in knots or the hair on your arm stand up, you need to tell one of your safe adults, which was also an activity in the program, was how to identify who's a safe adult. So kids have these gut reactions. And a lot of times our society tells us to ignore our gut reactions, that we're overreacting, especially if you're a woman. But they're having these gut reactions. They know when something is off. So if we pick a board game or a math curriculum, they might not have the words to say, I'm struggling with this because of XYZ. I mean, we all have adults in our lives who would struggle to clearly articulate what they're struggling with and to have the confidence to say it. But if you can give them 2 to 3 options, their gut will eliminate the stuff that they're not comfortable with naturally. And it'll take care of that even if they don't have the word choices.
Well, yeah. And who doesn't love choices? Neurodiverse or neurotypical, that's just human nature for most people. Sure, sometimes I want my husband to just freaking decide what's for dinner. Sometimes I just don't have the energy to make that decision or any decision by the time we get to dinner. But for the most part, it feels good to have some control over what's going on in your world.
Mm-hmm.
And if your kiddo is ready to verbally express their preferences and, shall we kindly call it, their dislikes, you can have really casual, organic conversations about what works, what doesn't work. When do you focus best? When do you feel like you can't focus? What makes learning just miserable? What helps?
Yeah, exactly. As long as we're on the theme of questions here too, right? Let's also talk about some questions that we can ask ourselves as the adults. It's so rare that kids ever do anything for the heck of it. Very often, there's a why behind the action. I know for me, when my kids were younger, I was always afraid that any undesirable behavior was a slippery slope or a gateway to that behavior being accepted forever or getting worse. And so my inclination was oftentimes, how do I stop this behavior? I need to nip it now because if I don't, I'll show them that this is acceptable. That was my younger self mentality with some of those things.
Well, yeah, and we still see that so often. My kiddo is fighting me on schoolwork, or it takes hours for something that should only take 30 minutes, or the whining is driving me nuts. And the number of comments that tell the person to just crack down even harder are truly shockingly plentiful. But we'd encourage you to take a page from some 21st century, heck, even a super popular 1980s parenting book, and remember that the behavior is communication.
Yeah.
It's telling us something. So if your kiddo takes 7 score in 4 years to do a math worksheet, this is an us issue, not
Mhm.
a them issue. Maybe it's too difficult. Maybe it's too easy. Maybe there's a sensory issue, or they might be struggling with perfectionism or anxiety. Those are going to be handled a little differently. Maybe there's dyscalculia or an issue with written expression. Maybe they're just burnt out, or maybe you're trying to force the wrong curriculum.
Yeah. I have a kid who can hear light bulbs. It could be a sensory issue. And you're not going to think to be like, are the light bulbs loud in here today? You know what I mean? And they're just going to come off as difficult or being an asshole. And in the meantime, they're like, can no one else hear this light bulb? Is it just me? So yeah. But even if your kiddo doesn't have the diagnosis for anxiety or dyscalculia or something like that, cracking down harder, making a sticker chart, paying them, which we see more than I thought I ever would, that's for sure. Withholding socialization or playtime or extracurriculars. I've seen that one too, which makes me so sad. None of those consequences or penalties or punishments are going to fix anxiety or dyscalculia or the light bulbs being noisy. You're putting a penalty into place that doesn't relate to the issue.
Well, and even if those things are diagnosed already, cracking down isn't going to fix the
No.
fact that something is out of sync. Now, look, we're realistic here. I have absolutely cracked down out of frustration because I'm not a perfect parent. I talked about that just last week. I took away TCG Live online because I just needed him to get this project done. But we have also discussed it once everyone has calmed down. And if I have said something or put something in place that once I've calmed down, I'm like, well, I need to walk that back. Walk it back when appropriate because modeling accountability and repair is so important. These kiddos, all kiddos need, but these kiddos especially need to learn how you take accountability and how you repair something when you weren't the version of yourself you wanted to be. None of them are like, oh, I hope I'm a real shit person today. I hope I piss off everyone I come in contact with. And so at the end of the day, if that's what's happened, they need to know how to be able to fix that so they don't go on feeling like they're a shit person, full stop. Come on. You're the adult in this scenario. Your kiddo is rarely going to come back to you and be like, I've been thinking I lost 5.5 hours of my life this week alone flopping around on the floor in an effort to avoid the worksheets. And I just don't like them. I could have been playing with friends or reading a book that I really enjoy in that time. So I think I've come up with a solution that will work for both of us. Listen, I think kids are awesome. Kids are awesome, and they will always surprise us. I am 100% positive that there will be times when they are surprisingly insightful, but expecting that the child in this situation will be the voice of reason and maturity isn't fair. The solution lies with us as the homeschool grown up in the equation to really recognize their behavior as communication and then come up with solutions, more than one, because again, choices, and present them to your kiddo.
Hmm. That's just it. So when you hear us talking about my kid is excelling with this or is deeply pursuing that, which is a big thing in our household, it's because we've done years of this, years and years of this. And it was much more intense in the earlier years. And now we're still doing this, but most of the time to a lesser degree. We're tweaking more often at this point. As kiddos grow and evolve, things need to be tweaked. Puberty is going to be a big shit stir when it enters the chat. I'm just going to let you know there's tons of studies out there about puberty and neurodivergence and how it's that much bigger and better, which is so much fun. More for two of my kids than the third kiddo. But yeah, I mean, we start out our episodes with our weekly update, and I'm like, Liam is taking the AP stats exam. Yeah. Well, I also showed up to a Zoom meeting on a random evening years ago and bawled my eyes out to strangers about not knowing what the hell to do with this child. So the struggles are there. I mean, I can remember and pinpoint an exact day when he was 3, 4, 3, almost 4, I think 3, where I cried in the hallway outside his bedroom and we both cried. And I mean, it was just disastrous. And it led to a huge shift in the way I parented him. I had this moment of like, I have to do something differently. We can't keep doing this. This isn't going to work. So trust me. Oh, there have been struggles, right? Oh, there have been so many struggles. It's just that over the years, we've built systems to accommodate the gaps before, thankfully, most of the time, the meltdowns occur. I've really been able to dial in how he learns and set up a communication system where he can share how he learns and what he wants. And the list goes on and on. But this is years and years in. This is not how it started.
Yeah. If you are a regular listener, you know that I think my kid is the absolute bee's knees. I think he's amazing. But also, we still have our fair share of frustration that culminates in tears. His, mine, both of us. This is not out when he was 3. He's 12 and it's last week. Is it easier than in the early years when we were still figuring out so much of this? Absolutely. Of course. And thank fucking God. The solution to the struggle, or perhaps a better way of putting it, is the progress towards a solution to the struggle is really paying attention and being responsive and remembering that the reality is they might always struggle with certain things, specific triggers, whatever. So we're going to focus on progress, minimizing the struggle or softening the reaction to the struggle. And again, because we try really hard to be honest and real around here, that can be thoroughly exhausting. So we've gone this whole episode and we're like, oh, it gets better and it's amazing. And we're doing this and we're doing that. We see you. Okay. And we acknowledge the tremendous amount of effort and energy that all of this takes. I think many of us were raised in environments that were less pro kid than the way we're raising our own kids now these days. But going back to the lingering effects of that whole nothing tastes as good as skinny feels, there's likely also a bunch of things like accommodating your kids is giving in, and if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. And that kind of stuff we need to continue unpacking and really addressing so that we can parent the way we want to. But just remember, there's a huge difference between lowering expectations and lowering barriers. Removing the barrier isn't lowering the standard. Wheelchair ramps don't make buildings easier. They make buildings accessible. Text to speech doesn't make Shakespeare any less Shakespeare. Body doubling doesn't make algebra easier. Interest-led learning doesn't make physics less rigorous. Accessibility isn't the opposite of challenge. It's what allows meaningful challenge to actually happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And the effort is tremendous, and everybody's journey is going to be their own and different. I saw a reel on Instagram the other day that was a twist on the whole everybody has the same 24 hours in a day. And we've talked about that bullshit before. My 24 hours and your 24 hours are not the same. I have raging ADHD and you have chronic illness. I can accomplish a lot in 24 hours. And then I'm going to crash and burn. But it's okay. That's how I function. But if you tried to accomplish what I do in a day, you'd crash and burn probably by lunchtime. We do not have the same 24 hours in a day. And I saw a video of a woman the other day who was combing out her son's hair, and he was 18, 19, something like that, but he was a total care autism kiddo. And she was like, unless you're bathing your 19-year-old child, we don't have the same 24 hours in a day. And so yeah, your journey is your own, and we see you and you're doing an amazing job. And if you need help trying to figure out how to create these differentiations to lower these barriers and make your days slowly but steadily less stressful and make that progress, and if you need help, if you need a partner, that's what we do. That's what we're here for. We have books and coaching and Patreon. And I mean, we're always here. We're always around. We're literally having these conversations all day, every day. So we are more than happy to help you. So you can do this. If you need some help, we've got you, but you can do this. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. Just like we're saying to our kiddos, accommodations aren't cheating or aren't terrible. You're allowed to ask for help. Doesn't make you less of a parent. Sometimes brainstorming is amazing. I did it on Zoom, bawling my eyes out, and it changed so much for me and my kiddo. So you can do this. So we shall end with our mantra for the week. And it's a short and sweet one, but man, is it one that you can just put in your pocket and remind yourself whenever you need to. It is one of homeschooling's greatest gifts is the freedom to stop doing what isn't working. Sit down with a blank piece of paper when you're done today. Write down what isn't working. And you can stop doing that stuff right now. And if you need help figuring out what to do in place of it, we can help you with that too. So keep it up. You're doing amazing, and happy homeschooling.
Yeah, have a good one.